Hi, everybody. I'm back again. I'm going to do a quick lesson with you. Well, maybe not so quick, but a lesson with you on problem 19, the problem set. So you should get out your lesson 19. It's two papers stapled together. On the front, you should have already done your sprint. So if you haven't done that yet, you can pause this video and do it. But you're going to do on side A, you're going to give yourself 2 minutes to do those problems. So it's fractions as whole numbers. So you're going to express the fractions as whole numbers. So 2 over 1 is like saying 2 divided by 1. 10/5 is like saying 10 divided by 5. So you can ask yourself, what times 5 is going to give me 10? And then there's your answer. Okay, so you're going to do A and B. When you're done with both of those, again, you want to see if you did better on B than A. That's the goal. You don't have to finish the page, but try to do a little bit better on the second try. Then if you want, you can go back and finish the page for extra practice. That could also be your multiplication fact practice for the day, is finishing those pages because you're still working on multiplication to do division. Okay, and then you're going to get started with the lesson 19 problem set. All right, so we're going to go to the first page. And on your problem set, make sure you're on problem set and not homework. Up at the top right-hand corner, it'll say lesson 19 problem set. And here's number 1. So number 1 says, divide each number line into the given fractional unit. Then place the fractions. Write each whole as a fraction. Okay, so they gave us 3 number lines, A, B, and C. And look at the number lines. What do you notice? They all start with what? And they all end with what whole number? So now that you can see that, B and C are missing something. What are they missing? They're missing the whole numbers 1 and 2. Okay, so right now I'm going to make my number lines even by adding those whole numbers 1 and 2 to lines B and C. So I'm going to get a black line, and you can do this while I'm doing it. Right underneath the whole numbers 1 and 2, I'm going to add them to line B, and then I'm going to add them to line C. And again, try to make sure you're lining them up right on top of each other. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to line A, and I am going to divide that number line into halves. So I'm going to change my line color to red. You can do it with your pencil. I'm just doing it colors so you can see it on my screen better. So I can see that it's divided. It says right here, divided in halves. So I'm going to take my number line and I'm going to divide each whole into 1/2. So from 0 to 1, I'm going to draw a line right in the middle, and that's going to divide that whole number in half. Then from 1 to 2, I'm going to divide that whole number in half. And then from 2 to 3, I'm going to divide that whole number in half. So now I've divided my number line into halves. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find these fractions and put them on the number line. So the first fraction is 3 halves. So if I start at 0, I know 0 is 0 halves. Then I go to 1/2, 2/2, and 3 halves. Okay, so I am going to try to write this with my fingers, so wish me luck here. All right, so I'm going to find 3 halves. And I'm going to put it on the number line by putting a dot right on the number line and putting the fraction underneath it. Okay, so I'm going to put a check. I did 3 halves. Now I need to find 5 halves. Well, I know if that's 3 halves, then I can just keep counting. So after 3 halves comes 4 halves, and then 5 halves. So at 5 halves, I'm going to put a dot. And then look, check that one off. The next fraction is actually 4 halves. And I already labeled it when I was counting up to 5 halves. So I go back to 4 halves and put my dot on the number line. So I'm going to check to make sure I found all 3 of those fractions and that they're labeled on the number line. Okay, then it said to write each whole as a fraction. So I'm going to go back to my whole numbers and I'm going to write them as a fraction. So I know 0 is going to be 0 halves. 1, if I count, this is 1 half and 2 halves. For whole number 2, I already wrote it, 4 halves. And then for the whole number 3, I know the fraction before is 5 halves. So at 3, it's going to be 6 halves. And if you look at 6 halves. It's kind of like what you just practiced on the sprint. 6 halves is also 6 divided by 2, which is 3 wholes. All right, so we're done with A. Go ahead, if you need to catch up, you can press pause and then continue watching. We're going to go on to B. Okay, now when I go to B, it says right here I need to divide it into fourths. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my line and I'm going to use the red to do something here. So it says to divide it into fourths. Well, we know 4 is an even number. So if it's an even number, you know there's going to be a line right in the middle. So I'm going to draw my line right in the middle. What do you notice? That line right in the middle is the half, and it lines up right with the half mark on line A. Okay, then I'm going to divide this whole in half and this whole in half. And look, I'm lining it right up with my red line up above. Okay, let me label my whole numbers. So let me go back here, and this is 1, this is 2, this is 1, this is 2. All right, so I don't get confused and think those are fraction marks. Those are the whole numbers. Okay, so let's go back to making those into fourths. So I'm going to, where's my shape? Whoops, sorry, insert shape. I'm gonna do my lines. And this time I'm going to make them blue. Okay, so I did it in half. So from 0 to 1, I divided it in half. But remember, we want fourths. So from 0 to 1, I need 4 equal parts. Well, I have 2. What am I going to do to make fourths? That's right. I'm going to take each of my halves and divide them in half. And now I have fourths, and you can count. From 0, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. So I'm going to do that for each whole number. So from 1 to 2, I'm going to make sure I have 4 equal parts. From 2 to 3, make sure I have 4 equal parts. Okay, so I'm going to double check, make sure there's 4 equal parts inside each whole number. And then once I've done that, I can go ahead and start labeling my fractions. So again, I'm going to do blue. Okay, so the first one they ask us to find is 9/4. Okay, well, to find 9/4, I could start at 0, which is 0/4, and I can count up until I get to 9. So let's label it as we go, the whole numbers. So at 0, I'm going to have 0/4. and then let's start counting. So from 0/4, you've got 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4 at the whole number, 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, 8/4, 9/4. So I'm going to draw my circle and I'm going to label it 9/4 and go back right here. The whole number 2 was 8/4. Okay, so I'm going to check off 9/4. We found it. Now they're asking me to find 11/4. Well, here's 9/4. So I'm just going to keep counting till I get to 11/4. 10/4, 11/4. I'm going to put my dot right on the number line and label 11/4. Check it off. And then I need to find 6/4. So I'm going to go backwards. At 2 wholes, I have 8/4. So I can count backwards from 2 wholes, or I can count forward from 1. So 1 is 4/4. So I can start at 4/4, 5/4, 6/4 is right here. I'm going to label it 6/4. Okay, the last thing I have to do is I have to show 3 wholes as a fraction. Well, the one before it is 11/4, so 3 wholes is going to be 12/4. And again, if you take 12 and divide it by 4, you get 3. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 4 divided by 4 is 1. And 0 divided by 4 is 0. So remember that fraction sign is also a division sign. Okay, so I have broken them up into fourths. I have labeled my fractions. So now all I have to do is do letter C. So now letter C says to divide it into eighths. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the denominator. It says 8, and I know 8 is an even number. So I know that there's going to be a line right in the middle. And again, I'm going to do it in red to show that they're all the same point on the number lines. So again, I'm going to line it up with the other red lines that are showing 1/2 and divide each of my whole numbers into halves. Now I'm going to divide them. I've divided them into halves, but I want eighths. So now that I have halves, what can I do the next step? Right, I'm going to divide my halves in half. So I'm going to choose blue because that's what I used up here. And you're going to line it up with the blue lines from line B, because now we're dividing them into fourths. So we did halves. Now we're doing fourths. I think you get the pattern here. All right, so I did my fourths, but remember we want eighths. How am I going to turn my fourths into eighths? All right, let me do pink. All right, so if you said divide those in half, you were right. So I divide each of these in half. And now I'm going to have eighths. And I can double check. I can count from 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts. So go ahead and continue dividing those fourths in half to give you eighths. And then double check that you have divided each whole number into 8 equal parts. Okay, the pink is a little bit light, so I'm going to go to a brown just to label the fractions. Okay, so now I need to label my fractions. Whew, 24/8. All right, so we need to find 24/8 on this number line. Well, the first thing I can do is I could go ahead and label my whole numbers. I know at 0 what's going to be my fraction. Good. I hope you said 0/8. Sorry, that's supposed to be an 8. Okay, best I can do there. All right, so this is 0/8. How many eighths would equal 1 whole? What would the fraction be? We're counting by eighths and it's 1 whole. Okay, I hope you said 8/8. Sorry, I'm at the very bottom and it's not letting me draw very well. So let's try this again. 8/8. Okay, and so if there's 8/8 in 1 whole, how many eighths are going to be in 2 wholes? Think about it. 8/8 in 1. How many eighths in 2? Well, 8 plus 8 more is 16/8. And if there's 16/8 in 2, how many eighths are going to be in 3? Just 8 more. So if there's 16/8 in 2, 8 more would be 24/8. And then you can check yourself with division. 0 divided by 8 is 0. 8 divided by 8 is 1. 16 divided by 8 is 2. And 24 divided by 8 is 3. So we know we're correct. We can do our division or you can use multiplication. 3 times 8 is 24. 2 times 8 is 16. 1 times 8 is 8. And 0 times 8 is 0. So just double check that your whole number fractions are correct. Now I can go ahead and label my fractions. 24/8, well, that's going to be easy. Look, I already labeled 24/8. It's one of my whole numbers. So I'm going to put a dot right at 3 because that's equal to 24/8, and I'm going to check it off. The next one is 19/8. So I'm going to go to 16/8 was right here at 2, and I'm going to count on. So from 16/8, the next one would be 17/8, 18/8, 19/8. So I'm going to draw my dot on the number line and then write it underneath. Check it off that I found it. And then find 16/8. Well, that's easy. It's right at 2. I had to write mine to the side a little bit because I ran out of room on the bottom. But you can write yours right underneath there. So 16/8 is right at 2 wholes. So I'm going to check that off. Okay, so right now, this is one of the goals in 3rd grade, is that you can divide a number line into equal parts and label the fractions on the number line. That is something that you need to be able to do on your own as a 3rd grader. So you and I just did it together. When you do the homework, you're going to try it on your own. All right, so now we're ready for the second part, for number 2. All right, so this is the same page, but what I did was I already divided it up on the top, just so that you can use it as a reference. And now we're going to go ahead and complete problem number 2. Now, as you see, it says use the number lines above to compare the following fractions using greater than, less than, or equal to. So for these, you don't have to draw anything because you've already drawn it up above. So all you have to do is find these fractions and compare them. Remember, if the fraction is closer to 0, it is smaller. If it's closer to the whole number 3, then it's larger. So let's look at the first one. It says 6/4 compared to 9/4. Well, most of you can do this without even using the number line because we can see that the denominators are the same. So I know that if the denominators are the same, I just have to compare my numerators, and the bigger numerator is going to give me more pieces of the same size. So 6/4 is less than 9/4. But I can also go up here to my number line, and here's 6/4, and here's 9/4, and I can see 6/4 is closer to 0, so it's less than 9/4. Okay, let's go across. 3/2 compared to 5/2. Again, the denominators are the same. So I know the pieces are the same size. So I know that 5 pieces is going to be more than 3 pieces when they are the same size. But again, I can go up to my number line. Here's 3/2, here's 5/2. 3/2 is closer to 0, so it is less than 5/2. Going across, 19/8 compared to 16/8. Again, I can look up here on my number line. Here's 16/8, here's 19/8. The denominators are the same, so I know that 19/8 is greater than 16/8. Okay, for the rest of them, the denominators are different, okay? And the numerators are different. So this is something that we haven't done, and this is something you definitely need to use the number lines for. So the next one is 16/8 compared to 3/2. So I'm going to go up to my number line. I'm going to find 16/8 is right here. 16/8 is right at the whole number of 2. And then 3/2 is up on line A. Look and find 3/2. So you're going to compare them. 16/8, which is actually right on the whole number 2. So I can come up and go, oh, it's right here on the whole number 2. And 3/2 is here. So if I'm comparing them, 16/8 is going to be what compared to 3/2? Right, it is going to be greater because 16/8 is closer to 3. 3/2 is closer to 0. So 3/8 is more. The next one is 9/4 compared to 19/8. Well, I find 9/4 on my number line B, and then find 19/8 on number line C. These two are really close, but you can tell 9/4, if I bring it down, is going to be right in front of 19/8. So 9/4 is closer to 0. So 9/4 is less than 19/8. This is where it comes into play as far as dividing your number line into equal parts, because if you don't divide it equally, it's going to be hard to compare them. So make sure you're lining your lines up. The half marks, the fourth marks, make sure they're lined up on top of each other. The whole numbers, make sure they're all lined up when you go to compare. Okay, 4/2 and 16/8. Here's 4/2 and here's 16/8. What do you notice about both of them? Good, 4/2 is actually at the whole number 2 because 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 16/2 is right at the whole number 2 because 16 divided by 8 is 2. So these two fractions are what? They are equal. They are at the same point on the number line. Okay, 6/4 and 16/8. I'm going to find 6/4 is right here, and 16/8 is right over here at the whole number 2. So again, 6/4, 16/8. 16/8 is right at the whole number 2. So 6/4 you can see is closer to 0, and 16/8 is closer to the whole number 3. So 6/4, since it's closer to 0, it is less than 16/8. All right, you're doing great. Hang in there, we got 2 more. Okay, 5/2 and 9/4. Here's 5/2, find 9/4. There's 9/4. They're pretty close together. But you can see that 5/2 is a little bit closer to 3 than 9/4. So 5/2 is greater than 9/4. Last one, 24/8 compared to 11/4. Well, let's find 24/8. It's on line C. It's right at the whole number 3. And then 11/4 is on line B, and it's right here before the whole number 3. So as you can see, 24/8 is right at 3, and 11/4 is before that or less than that. So 24/8 is greater than 11/4. All right, I hope this helped you out. What you're going to do is you're going to turn the page, and tomorrow you're going to do the homework side. So it is the same exact problem, except the fractions are different. You are going to divide your number lines into thirds, sixths, and fifths. Be careful with the fifths because there's no way to divide it in half and then half again. You just have to kind of eyeball it and make sure you have 5 equal parts in between your whole numbers. Okay, look at the whole numbers too. If you notice on the homework page, it doesn't start at 0. It starts at 1. So be careful when you are labeling your fractions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick video of the answers to the homework page so that you can check your work when you're done. Just make sure if you're starting at 1 and it's thirds, your first fraction is going to be 3/3, 1 whole. So it's not starting at 0. So make sure you take a look at that. If you have any questions, call me, email me, sign up for a Zoom meeting with me, and I can go over it with you. Otherwise, I'll do a quick video with the answer key, and you can check your answers. All right, do a great job. Proud of you guys, and keep up the good work.